What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Plus. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about a pretty interesting story of Sony suing Tencent. Now, this came out today, but really this was last week, went through the court system, the California courts. And so Sony's basically going after Tencent for the game Light of Motoram, which was a game that was actually revealed a little while ago, I think 6-7 months ago. And I remember watching, I don't remember if it was at the Game Awards or where it was, but I feel like I even co-streamed. I was watching it live, and I remember even thinking to myself, man, this looks very, very much like Horizon. Well, turns out it's pretty interesting. We also got a couple extra details with Horizon in this court document, one of which, by the way, is that Sony looks at it as one of their most sacred kind of IPs that they've made. Another one is that I believe the franchise has sold 38 million units. Now, there's actually a point earlier in the document. I tried to read as much as I could. There's a lot of just legal stuff in there, and I think it's like 48 pages long. They say, I think, Horizon Zero Dawn, so the first game alone, sold 24 million. Remember, this is something that we've talked a little bit about in the past, that this is a franchise that sold so well, at least initially, and I feel like it kind of gave PlayStation the wrong... I like Horizon, but I think it gave them the wrong idea that it is like a thing you have to do like 15 games on, and I think over time it's just people have gotten a little bit more tired of it. Still 38 million, but 24 million of that, right? So only 14 million is not the first game. And you got VR games, you got the Lego game. So it's definitely done less, as time has gone on. But still, it's enormous. That is interesting to hear, because you can kind of start figuring out how much each game sold. But they talk about this game from Tencent, and they talk about that they believe that it started, I believe, in 2023, and then Tencent actually came to PlayStation in 2024 and asked if they could license out Horizon, and PlayStation said no. Then when PlayStation kind of saw what was going on with this stealing thing, they went back to Tencent to just talk to them like, hey, what are you doing? And Tencent asked again if they could license the game, in which PlayStation said no. To me, that is really the kicker. See, like the Pal World Nintendo thing, like that was an interesting thing. I didn't really follow that all too closely. You can make arguments, I'm sure. Actually, definitely the design of them, I think you could. But like this, look, if it was only the trailer and then the comparison to Horizon, I think you could look at it and have an interesting debate on if they actually or what would be defined as like ripping off or stealing, right? Like, is this actually stealing Horizon? I actually think you'd make a pretty good point, because you look at the world, you look at the creatures, you look at the character. Now, while it's not a redhead, she very much moves like Aloy. And then you watch the gameplay towards the end of the trailer when they're kind of squaring up and like hitting weak points, and it's like, oh my dear God, how much more on the nose does it need to be? You can make an argument. I think you can make a very good argument and probably sue and probably win for something like that. But what about this extra part? What about Tencent twice asking PlayStation if they could license out Horizon to them? So what does that mean? Well, that means that a year or two prior that Tencent started making this game, and whether or not they knew at the time, and I think actually that is what PlayStation insinuates like in the lawsuit, where it's like, because Horizon is so big in 2023 when this game started, there's no way that the idea of Horizon wasn't in Tencent's head when they made it. And I think that's a good point, right? Because whether immediately they knew they were stealing it or they thought they were doing something a little bit different, but then maybe they got worried about it and said, this is pretty close to Horizon. Either way though, it's still not a good look, because if they made it, they started it with the intention that it was going to be Horizon, but they couldn't do it. Then they had to ask PlayStation. PlayStation said no, and then they kept going, right? So that's bad. Or if they thought they were doing something original, but it really was still Horizon, and then they went to Sony afterwards and said, hey, maybe we were making this game, then we realized it actually is very much like your game. Why don't you just give us that license and we'll make you like a spin-off game, and then we won't get in trouble. Either way, I find it extremely difficult to believe PlayStation PlayStation would lose this. I don't know. I think going to them and asking them if they could have Horizon is the kicker, because what is this game looking like? It looks like Horizon. What did they ask to take from PlayStation? Horizon. So it's like, okay, just because PlayStation told you no doesn't mean that you make your own Horizon game, right? And, in the lawsuit, they go through like articles that are literally calling it out. They go through like, I think Steam comments that are saying, hey, I can't believe that this game exists. Interesting, like, I guess how lawsuits work now, like just using that they use like a Kotaku, which not actually a pretty terrible website, but still, I guess you can use that title to say, hey, look, major publications are even talking about this online Discord. And that is important. You know what I mean? Where it's like, if people online are talking about these two games, if people online are talking about this game being a ripoff of Horizon, or them being very similar, and then there's articles written about it where they're discussing it, and then people are discussing it on online forums, that seems like the evidence you would need to say, hey, this isn't just Sony's executives being greedy and saying, hey, this looks a little bit like our game. No, the internet actually believes. Now, I don't know who would get fooled on it, but there's a lot of people that think that it looks like there's people that think it's a ripoff, right? Whether or not those people are gullible enough to say buy it and not gullible like you can spend your money however you want. That's not really what I mean. I mean like the average Joe that goes out to the store and gets this game thinking that it's Horizon. I don't know how many people would be fooled by that, and that might be a big case to make, right? Where it's like, well, how many average people would accidentally get this game, implying that Tencent was trying to steal it, right? Let's make this game look like Horizon so that when somebody goes to buy Horizon, they accidentally buy our game. I just wonder how much you have to prove that, because that's very hard to prove because the game's not out, right? But then it's like, well, what about just like the online discourse of people openly talking about, yeah, that game's like a blatant ripoff. Whether those people would actually buy it, that's kind of separate, right? It's like, well, they're talking about it. So I do find it interesting. I feel like PlayStation should win it. I'm not a huge fan of like when these things happen. The Pal World one was interesting. I think that was a little bit more of like a gray area. This one, I don't know. This one, especially, again, them going to PlayStation. If Pal World, if those devs went to Nintendo, went to Pokemon and said, hey, we want, like, if it was the exact same thing and they did it, I feel like that also would make it much, much worse. And Nintendo would probably be able to swoop in and destroy them, nuke them from above, with that situation. I just feel like that's kind of the killer that PlayStation would need to win this. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.